What's going on, guys? Welcome to the next part in the news section. In the last part, we did a quick recap, or intro, I should say, of how child controllers work. And in this part, we're actually going to be bringing in the floating panel I had previously mentioned, now that we understand the premise of child controllers. So the first thing we're going to want to go ahead and do here is actually close up Xcode, and I'm going to open up Terminal here. We want to cd into our project, and we're going to do a pod init. This initializes CocoaPods, which is a mechanism to bring in dependencies into our project. If you're not familiar, I'm going to toss a link down below how to install this onto your Mac. It's very straightforward and there's not a whole lot to it. Once you've got CocoaPods initialized, you have a new pod file now that you can go ahead and open up. And in here, we're going to bring in a dependency, and it's super creatively called floating panel. I believe it is singular. Go ahead and make sure you lowercase the p, otherwise you'll see an error. And in here, we can go ahead and run a pod install. And once you run it, you should see the dependency floating panel successfully installed. And now you can close up your terminal. We can go ahead and open up our project here. And we can go ahead and jump into the XC workspace. Make sure you open up the workspace. If you open up just the Xcode proj, you're gonna run into a whole lot of errors. So let's go ahead and expand our Xcode window here. And first things first, let me go ahead and try to run this in our simulator to make sure that nothing just broke as a result of bringing in that dependency. We're sticking with the 12 Pro Max. Go ahead and give that a run. The first time it builds after a dependency, it could be a little slow. It looks like it was not for me, which is great. I'll take it. And let's go ahead and create this floating panel. So we're going to jump into watchlist view controller. At the bottom here, I'm going to say set up floating panel. And we're going to create this function right here. We'll say private func set up floating panel. And let's talk about what we want to do and how we want to do it. So I'm going to have a global instance here, and this global instance is going to be of type panel, and rather called panel of type floating panel view controller, I believe is what it's called. The reason it will not autocomplete is because we want to make sure to import floating panel, the dependency we just brought in. And let's make sure we get the correct one here. It is a floating panel controller. And now we need to actually create this floating panel controller. So we can create it here. We're going to say a panel is going to be, and that's not how you spell panel, is going to be a floating panel container. Let's see, let's try that again. Floating panel controller, not container is what I'm looking for. And we're just going to create this like so, right? We don't need anything in the initializer. We're going to create it like that. And the first thing we're going to want to do here is simply say, or the last thing, we're going to have stuff in between here, is we're going to say add panel to self. Now you can notice, or rather to parent, which is self. Now you'll notice this is similar to how we looked at our child controllers. Now before I further continue, let me go ahead and assign a surface view background color. So we're going to go ahead and make this a secondary system background, and let's just give it a run and let's see what that looks like. This add panel to parent should look somewhat familiar from the child controller video we just went through. And similar to what we had, this is the floating panel, but what's nice is they've got the, gestures baked in already, so we can expand it to be, full screen, halfway, and then what they call the tip, where just the bottom is showing. So it's looking pretty darn good. So we do need to customize a couple things here. So we'll want to actually pass in the controller that will supply the content here. So on this panel, there is a variety of functions and properties you can set. So there's toolbar items, you can set editing, you can set the content, which is not popping up here, so I'm just going to type it out. Content view controller, and we're going to create it up here. So I'm going to say let VC is going to be our top stories view controller. And for those of you who might have forgotten, we had created this in one of our very first videos here, and there is absolutely nothing in here, and we're going to build this out later on, so we're going to keep it that way. And now that we've got this set up here, the other thing that I'd like to do is when this panel gets all the way to the top, I want the title for stocks to go away because like it doesn't look super nice, and that's kind of what happens when you go to the normal stocks app. You can maybe swap this out for a different looking view with an animation, but how do we figure out these different events on this panel? So the panel actually has a delegate, which you guys might have seen when I created this here. You can actually pass in the delegate directly into here as well. Either or are perfectly fine. We'll do it this way. So we're going to want to add an extension to our watch list view controller, which will be the delegate here. And all the functions are optional, but the one that we care about is did move to a particular state. So let's see, floating panel did move. And let's see if there's one with a given state. So there's will begin, did change state is actually what I'm looking for. And we're going to say that the title view, or the navigation, I should say, item.title view is hidden is going to equal whether the floating panel controller dot state is equal to, let's see, I believe what they call it is full. So if the state is full, we're going to set the title view hidden to true, otherwise it'll be false. So if you go ahead and give that a run, what you'll start to notice now is the panel starts off in this half position, and I get up here and boom, our title goes away, get back to half, comes back, get back to the very edge, stays, back as well, stays, in the visible position. So that's how we can leverage this floating panel delegate. Now there are a ton of functions off of the floating panel delegate where you can really use it to customize the look and feel of everything. Mostly the defaults, work for 99.9% of use cases, but just to let you guys know, stuff is available to you. The last thing we'll do here, even though we're not going to, implement it too far, we are going to use a table view to implement our news. So we're going to create this table view here, and the reason I'm creating it now is because we want to say in our floating panel where we create it, let's see if I can find it. In our floating panel creation, we want to say go ahead and track the vc.table view, and we're going to want to make it public actually so we can access it. And what tracking actually means is when the table view has actually gone ahead and scrolled all the way to the top, when we further scroll down on it, we don't want the table view to, bounce in the normal bounce interaction. What we want to see happen is we want the table view, or the panel rather, to swipe down. So it's a lot easier to see once there's actually content in, the table view here. So we can go ahead and take a look at that thereafter. One thing I just noticed here, which is kind of strange, is this panel is behind the search bar. And presumably we can actually put this title view configuration after the panel, and hopefully the bar will be, behind the particular panel. But if it's not, that's okay. We'll go ahead and fix up the bouncing on this. There's a couple parameters that you can configure on this floating panel. So let me just click into it so everybody can take a quick peek. So there are different content modes. There's static, there's fits to bounce, there's a delegate here, there's a surface view. Backdrop view is basically the, what's behind the panel itself. And then there is the pan gesture. There's that pan gesture I was talking about. The state is, how the state of the panel looks, so half or full or, tip. There's a layout, behavior. You can create totally custom behaviors here if you want to, etc., etc. There's actually a pretty long list, so not going to go through all of this right now, but you guys hopefully get the point. So yeah, we've got a floating panel now, and this is our foundation to start to set up our news as well as hook up that news API. So that's all I've got in this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.